Sarah Chen held her breath as she stepped through the shimmering portal, her small travel bag clutched tightly against her chest. The crystalline floors of the Galactic Academy's arrival chamber stretched out before her, their surface rippling with waves of soft blue light that followed each of her tentative steps. Earth's most advanced quantum laboratories seemed like antiques compared to even this simple arrival room. Species designation and credentials, chirped a melodious voice from somewhere above. Sarah looked up to see a hovering orb of prismatic light, its surface shifting through colors she didn't even have names for. Human. Sarah Chen, PhD candidate in Xenolinguistics, Earth University Complex. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. First exchange student under the Sol System Integration Protocol. The orb pulsed once, and Sarah felt a gentle tingle as it scanned her. Interesting, it hummed. Your neural patterns show remarkable activity for a level 2 species. Please proceed to the main atrium. Sarah bit back a comment about species classification. She'd been briefed extensively about the Academy's rigid hierarchy, and arguing with an AI attendant wouldn't make a good first impression. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and walked forward as the crystalline walls shifted to form a corridor before her. The main atrium took her breath away. Towering spires of living crystal stretched impossibly high, their surfaces alive with streams of light-based data flowing in complex patterns. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and dimensional states moved through the space with practiced ease. A group of ethereal creatures that seemed to be made of pure mathematics floated past, their thoughts manifesting as complex equations in the air around them. A cluster of crystalline entities communicated through synchronized light pulses, their bodies refracting the ambient light into rainbow cascades. Ah, the human specimen has arrived. The voice, though translated through her neural interface, carried unmistakable disdain. Sarah turned to face Professor Zix 427, instantly recognizing the being from her briefing materials. The professor's form was that of pure energy contained within an iridescent shell, changing colors in patterns that suggested deep thought and mild annoyance. Professor, Sarah bowed slightly, following the protocol for addressing a Level 5 species instructor. Thank you for accepting my application to your advanced cognitive integration course. A formality, the professor's shell rippled with shades of dismissive blue. The Council's directive for species integration left me little choice. Though I must admit, your test results were curious. The last word carried a hint of something beyond mere disdain, perhaps uncertainty. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near one of the data streams caught their attention. A young Nexian, a species of hyper-intelligent crystalline beings, was attempting to decode a particularly complex data pattern, their frustration evident in the discordant frequencies emanating from their form. Without thinking, Sarah stepped forward. The pattern repeats every 7th sequence, she said quietly, but it's offset by a 3rd rotation in the quantum layer. The Nexian froze, their crystalline form briefly clouding before clearing with sudden understanding. The data stream unfolded perfectly, revealing its contents. Professor Zix 427's shell flickered with rapid color changes, surprise, confusion, and something else Sarah couldn't interpret. How did you? The professor began, then stopped abruptly. Never mind. Class begins in precisely 15 standard units. Do not be late, human. The Academy has maintained its standards for 12,000 years. I do not intend to lower them now. As the professor floated away, Sarah caught fragments of whispered conversations from nearby students. A human. Level 2 species. Did you see how she read that pattern? Probably just luck. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering her grandmother's words. Sometimes the best way to prove yourself is to let others underestimate you. She had earned her place here, regardless of what anyone thought about humanity's evolutionary status. And this was just the beginning. Looking up at the soaring crystal spires and the dance of knowledge flowing through them, Sarah felt a surge of determination. She might be the first human at the Galactic Academy, But she wouldn't be the last. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity could really do. The Advanced Cognitive Integration Lecture Hall defied conventional geometry. Crystalline platforms floated at various heights and angles, each occupied by students from different species, whose natural states required specific gravitational orientations. Sarah found herself on one of the few traditional seats, positioned near the center of the dimensional array. Today, Professor Zix 427's voice resonated through the neural interfaces of all present students. We addressed the cornerstone of galactic philosophical advancement. The professor's energy shell pulsed with deep purples and blues of academic pride. Sarah noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere as her fellow students straightened, extended, or compressed their various forms in anticipation. Even the usually distracted quantum collective students, who existed in multiple probability states simultaneously, focused all their potential realities on the professor. The Infinity Cascade Riddle, Professor Zix 427 announced, their shell briefly flashing with intense gold. The air in the center of the lecture hall began to shimmer, and suddenly the space was filled with shifting, interlocking patterns of light and shadow. Sarah leaned forward, fascinated. The patterns moved like living things, each transformation suggesting another layer of meaning beneath. They reminded her of watching sunlight dance through leaves on a windy day, or the way clouds seemed to form faces only to dissolve and reshape themselves moments later. For 10,000 years, the professor continued, this riddle has challenged the greatest minds in the galaxy. The quantum collectives have computed 13 trillion possible solutions. The crystal harmonics have attuned their entire civilization to its frequencies. Even the time weavers, with their ability to perceive past and future simultaneously, have failed to unravel its true meaning. The patterns continue to shift, now incorporating movements that seem to bend space itself. Sarah watched as a Nexian student's crystalline form vibrated in resonance with the display, their normal prismatic brilliance dulling with concentration. The riddle, Professor Zix 427 explained, presents itself differently to each observer, yet remains fundamentally unchanged. It is not merely a puzzle of logic or mathematics, but a challenge to our understanding of reality itself. Sarah's eyes tracked the patterns, noticing how they seemed to flow like water yet break like glass, expand like the universe yet contract like a closing flower. There was something familiar about their movement, something that tugged at the edges of her memory. Previous attempts at solution have approached the riddle through dimensional mathematics, quantum probability matrices, and even temporal recursion theory. The professor's shell rippled with what might have been amusement. All have failed. A thought weaver student, their form, a complex network of interconnected ideas, raised an appendage. Professor, is it true that exposure to the complete riddle pattern can cause cognitive dissolution in less developed species? Indeed. Professor Zix 427 turned slightly toward Sarah, which is why we are displaying only a simplified version today. We wouldn't want to overwhelm our newer participants. Several students shifted their attention to Sarah, their various sensory organs expressing what she interpreted as concern or curiosity. She kept her focus on the patterns, which had begun to move in ways that reminded her of something she'd seen long ago. Your assignment, the professor announced, is to observe the basic pattern sequence and document your initial theoretical approach to solving it. While none of you will achieve the actual solution, your attempts will help develop your multi-dimensional thinking capabilities. The patterns spun faster now, their movements creating afterimages that seemed to exist in spaces between spaces. Sarah felt her mind trying to grasp something just beyond her conscious understanding. It was like trying to remember a dream, or the lyrics to a half-forgotten song. Then suddenly, she saw it. The answer was so simple, so obvious, that she almost laughed out loud. Without thinking about the consequences, Sarah raised her hand, her movement causing ripples of surprise through the dimensional array of students. Professor Zix 427's shell flickered with brief annoyance. Yes, Human Chen. Do you have a question about the assignment parameters? No, Professor. Sarah said clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have the solution." The silence in the lecture hall grew so profound that Sarah could hear the soft hum of the dimensional stabilizers maintaining the various gravity fields. Professor Zix 427's shell had frozen in a state of pale azure, a color she hadn't seen them display before. "That," the professor said slowly, "is an inappropriate attempt at humor." Their shell rippled with waves of deep indigo. "The Infinity Cascade Riddle has confounded civilizations far more advanced than your own for millennia." Sarah stood, her heart pounding but her voice remaining steady. "With respect, Professor, I believe that's precisely why humans might see it differently." She gestured toward the shifting patterns still dancing in the center of the hall. "We're not burdened by advanced mathematical frameworks or quantum computational methods." A Thoughtweaver student pulsed with skepticism, their network of ideas forming complex doubt patterns. "The riddle operates on at least 17 dimensional planes simultaneously. Human brains can only process 3 spatial dimensions consciously." "True," Sarah nodded, stepping away from her seat and walking closer to the pattern display. "But humans excel at something else. We see patterns in chaos and meaning in randomness. We've spent our entire evolutionary history finding connections where none seem to exist." Professor Zix 427's shell began shifting through colors rapidly, indicating intense cognitive activity. "Explain." "The answer isn't in the patterns themselves," Sarah said, reaching out toward the shifting lights. "It's in the spaces between them. Look, every culture in the galaxy has approached this as a problem of mathematics or logic, trying to solve each layer independently. But what if it's not meant to be solved that way?" She pointed to where 2 light streams crossed, creating a complex interference pattern. "Humans have something we call pareidolia. We see faces in clouds, animals in star constellations, and patterns in random noise. We can't help it. Our brains are wired to find meaning everywhere." The crystalline students chimed in harmonic confusion as Sarah continued. "The riddle isn't asking us to solve it logically. It's asking us to see all the patterns simultaneously, not as separate puzzles, but as one unified whole. Like those 3D pictures from Earth that look like random dots until you unfocus your eyes and see the hidden image." "Impossible." A quantum collective student flickered through several probability states. "The computational requirements alone." "That's just it," Sarah interrupted excitedly. "You're trying to compute something that requires intuition. Humans spend their childhoods finding shapes in clouds and stars. We tell stories about the figures we see in random patterns. We create art by deliberately placing chaos in a framework that suggests meaning." She turned back to the central pattern. "Watch this." Sarah reached out and traced her finger through the air, following seemingly random paths through the light streams. "See how this curve here mirrors the flow over there? And how this spiral pattern repeats at different scales, like a visual echo." The pattern seemed to respond to her gestures, shifting and flowing with newfound harmony. Professor Zix 427's shell had taken on a crystalline transparency she'd never seen before. "The riddle isn't asking for a solution," Sarah said softly. "It's asking for recognition. All these patterns, they're the same pattern, just viewed from different dimensional perspectives, like a circle appearing as a line when viewed from the side, or a cube appearing as a square. We're not supposed to solve each dimension separately. We're supposed to see them all at once, as different views of the same underlying reality." The lecture hall erupted in a cacophony of translated exclamations as the pattern suddenly shifted, merging and flowing in perfect synchronization with Sarah's explanation. Professor Zix 427's shell began to pulse with a brilliant white light. "In all my centuries of teaching," they said, their translated voice carrying a note of wonder, "no one has ever—" They paused, their shell rippling with new colors Sarah had never seen before. "How did you know to look for the meta-context rather than the individual patterns?" Sarah smiled, thinking of summer days spent watching clouds with her grandmother. Sometimes, she said, the best way to understand something is to stop trying to understand it, and just let your mind see what's really there. Professor Zix 427's shell continued to pulse with brilliant white light, casting prismatic reflections across the dimensional array of the lecture hall. The patterns at the center of the room had transformed, no longer a chaotic dance of light and shadow, but a harmonious display that seemed to breathe with its own life. "Impossible," whispered a Nexian student, their crystalline form vibrating with intense frequencies. "Yet, I see it now. How did we miss something so elegant?" Sarah watched as understanding rippled through the assembled students like a wave. The quantum collectives, usually existing in multiple probability states, unified into single forms as they processed the revelation. The Thought Weaver's idea networks began restructuring themselves, incorporating this new paradigm into their collective knowledge. "Would you demonstrate again?" Professor Zix 427's voice carried an unfamiliar tone. Humility. "Show us how you perceive the connecting threads." Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped into the pattern matrix. "It's like Earth's art forms," she explained, gesturing to where light streams intersected. "In human music, the spaces between notes are as important as the notes themselves. In painting, negative space defines the subject as much as the paint does." The patterns responded to her movements, flowing like water around her hands. Every culture on Earth has children's games based on finding hidden images. We call them connect the dots, or cloud watching, or constellation mapping. We're trained from childhood to see beyond the obvious patterns. A Time Weaver student, their form shifting between past and future states, raised an appendage. "But how do you process the quantum variances? The temporal inconsistencies?" Sarah smiled. "We don't, not consciously. Humans are actually quite good at holding contradictory ideas simultaneously. We call it cognitive dissonance, and while it's often seen as a flaw in logical thinking, it's also what lets us see multiple possibilities at once." She pointed to where the patterns created a complex interference web. "Look here, it's like one of our optical illusions. You can see either pattern, but not both at the same time. Yet you know both exist. The riddle isn't asking us to resolve the contradictions. It's asking us to accept them as different facets of the same truth." Professor Zix 427 moved closer, their shell now cycling through colors so rapidly it appeared almost transparent. "In 12,000 years of academic history, no species has ever approached the riddle from this perspective. We assumed that greater computational power, more advanced dimensional mathematics, or higher consciousness was needed. Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "the simplest answer is the one we overlook because we're trying too hard to be clever." The professor's shell suddenly stabilized into a deep, resonant gold. "The implications of this are significant. If human perception can unlock what advanced civilizations could not." They paused, their translated voice carrying a note of wonder. "Perhaps we have been measuring advancement by the wrong metrics entirely." Around the hall, students began sharing observations in a cascade of translated excitement. The quantum collective started experimenting with probability streams based on intuitive leaps rather than pure computation. The crystal harmonics attempted to incorporate elements of randomness into their usually perfect symmetries. Sarah watched as her simple solution triggered what appeared to be a paradigm shift in alien thinking. It reminded her of the story of the Wright brothers, how their primitive approach to flight succeeded where more sophisticated attempts had failed. "Human Chin." Professor Zix 427 addressed her formally, their shell now emitting a steady, respectful glow. "It seems we owe your species an apology. We have mistaken simplicity for primitiveness and overlooked the power of—" They paused, searching for the right term, "of seeing with new eyes." The patterns in the center of the room had settled into a gently pulsing mandala, each layer shifting and flowing into the next in perfect harmony. It looked, Sarah thought with a smile, exactly like the soap bubbles she used to blow as a child, catching rainbows in their ever-changing surfaces. News traveled faster than light through the Galactic Academy's neural networks. By the time Sarah left the lecture hall, the crystalline corridors hummed with excitement. Data streams carried the information in countless languages, each translation attempting to capture the significance of what had occurred. Is it true? A group of junior quantum collective students materialized around her, their probability fields buzzing with curiosity. Did you really solve it by not solving it? Sarah was about to respond when a familiar prismatic glow approached. Professor Zix 427's shell had settled into a new color pattern she hadn't seen before. Bands of deep blue interwoven with threads of gold. Human Chen, the professor addressed her, then paused as if reconsidering the formal title. Sarah, the Academy's Administration Council requests your presence. Your solution has caused quite a stir. They glided through the grand corridors together, passing groups of students from every known spacefaring civilization. Many stopped their activities to watch, their various sensory organs tracking Sarah's movement with newfound interest. The Library of Infinite Knowledge has received over 10,000 requests for access to Earth's cultural database in the past hour, Professor Zix 427 commented. Particularly interesting is the sudden demand for what you call children's picture books and abstract art. Sarah noticed a group of crystal harmonics attempting to recreate a human optical illusion, their usually perfect geometric forms deliberately incorporating elements of chaos. Nearby, a cluster of time weavers were studying recordings of Earth cloud formations, their temporal sensors trying to map the random patterns. The Administration Council chamber was a vast sphere of living crystal, its surfaces shifting to accommodate the various dimensional requirements of its occupants. 12 of the most senior academics in the galaxy waited within, their forms representing the peak of evolution from their respective species. Sarah Chen, the first speaker's thoughts translated directly into comprehensible concepts in her mind. We have reviewed the records of today's lecture. What you have demonstrated goes beyond solving a simple riddle. Simple. A ripple of translated amusement passed through the chamber. The second speaker, a being of pure mathematical thought, pulsed with intensity. We had classified the Infinity Cascade Riddle as a Category 7 cognitive challenge. No species below Level 5 has ever. Perhaps, interrupted the first speaker, we should reconsider our classification systems entirely. Sarah stood straighter, feeling the weight of the moment. The human mind evolved to find patterns in chaos, she explained. We developed art and music and storytelling before we developed advanced mathematics. Our greatest scientific breakthroughs often came from intuitive leaps rather than pure logic. Yes, Professor Zix 427 joined in, their shell pulsing with academic excitement. I've been reviewing Earth's history. The theory of relativity came from imagining riding on a beam of light. The structure of the benzene molecule was inspired by a dream about a snake eating its own tail. Even your early space program began with stories about flying to the moon. The council members communicated in rapid bursts of thought and energy. Sarah waited, remembering her briefing about council protocols. Finally, the first speaker addressed her again. We have made a decision. The Academy will immediately establish a new department, Human Cognitive Studies. Professor Zix 427 has volunteered to lead it, with you as the primary research associate. Sarah blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a student. You are the bridge, the second speaker pulsed. Between logic and intuition. Between mathematics and art. Between chaos and pattern. Their mathematical form rearranged itself into something almost organic. We have spent millennia advancing our analytical capabilities. Perhaps it is time we learn to see with human eyes. As Sarah looked around the chamber, she saw something she never expected to see in the Galactic Academy. The most advanced beings in the galaxy were learning to imagine. Deep in the Academy's archives of forgotten knowledge, Sarah stood before a holographic display that took her breath away. The image showed a cave painting from Earth, dated to over 30,000 years ago. Next to it floated a recreation of the Infinity Cascade Riddle's core pattern sequence. They were identical. Fascinating, isn't it? Professor Zix 427's shell rippled with subdued colors of deep thought. We found similar patterns in ruins across 17 different star systems, all dating to approximately the same period in your species' prehistoric era. Sarah reached out to touch the holographic cave painting, her fingers passing through the ancient handprints that surrounded the familiar spiral pattern. "This is from the Chauvet Cave in France," she whispered. "But how? Humans weren't spacefaring 30,000 years ago. We were just learning to create art." "Were you?" A new voice joined them. Archivist Min Sora, a thought weaver whose idea network spanned 12 dimensions, approached the display. "Or were you remembering?" The archivist's form shifted, projecting a series of images into the air around them. Each showed variations of the same pattern, carved into monoliths on distant worlds, woven into the architecture of abandoned space stations, encoded in the crystalline memory banks of long-dead civilizations. "When we first discovered these patterns," Min Sora continued, "we assumed they were mathematical proofs left behind by an advanced civilization. We spent millennia trying to decode them through logic and computation." The archivist's network pulsed with gentle amusement. "Never once did we consider they might be art." Professor Zix 427 moved closer to the display, their shell refracting the holographic light in mesmerizing ways. "The dating is conclusive. These patterns appeared simultaneously across the galaxy during a period when, according to all our historical records, humanity was in its infancy on Earth." Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Unless we weren't always there. She turned to face the others. What if humans didn't originate on Earth? What if we were relocated? Our memories of the stars encoded into art and story and myth. The archive chamber hummed with energy as Min Sora processed this suggestion. There are gaps in our historical records, a period of great upheaval, approximately 30,000 of your years ago. Many civilizations fell, others simply vanished. And now, Professor Zix 427 added, their shell pulsing with excitement. The first human to enter the Academy immediately recognizes and solves a pattern that these lost civilizations left scattered across the stars. Sarah walked slowly around the holographic display, studying each iteration of the pattern. Every human culture has stories about the stars. We drew constellations, built pyramids aligned with celestial bodies, created myths about beings from the sky. She paused, a thought striking her. We never stopped looking up, even when we forgot why. Min Sora's idea network expanded, incorporating this new perspective. Perhaps that is why your species sees the patterns differently. You are not learning something new. You are remembering something ancient. The archive's crystals hummed with a deeper resonance as more historical data flowed through their matrix. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing more connections. The golden ratio in human art matching the architectural principles of abandoned alien cities, Earth's earliest musical scales perfectly harmonizing with the frequencies found in ancient stellar databases. There's more, Professor Zix 427 said softly. The Council has authorized access to the sealed records. Sarah, what you solved wasn't just a riddle. It was a key. The professor's shell shifted to reveal a new hologram. A star map unlike anything Sarah had seen before. And there, hidden in the seemingly random arrangement of stars, was that same pattern, writ large across the galaxy itself. The question now, Min Sora's thought voice resonated with quiet intensity, is not just who you were, but what you were meant to remember. The newly established Department of Human Cognitive Studies buzzed with an energy unlike anywhere else in the Academy. Where other research spaces maintained rigid order, this chamber embraced controlled chaos. Holographic art from Earth's greatest museums floated alongside mathematical equations. The sound of classical music mixed with the harmonics of alien thought patterns. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a circle of alien students. Professor Zix 427's shell glowed with warm colors as they observed the unusual teaching session. Close your sensory inputs, Sarah instructed, or whatever comes closest for your species. Now, imagine something that doesn't exist. The quantum collective students flickered through probability states, struggling with the concept. A young crystal harmonic chimed in confusion. But how can we calculate the properties of something non-existent? Don't calculate, Sarah smiled. Dream. Like when I showed you the Earth game of finding shapes in clouds. There's no right answer, only possibilities. Professor Zix 427 moved closer, their shell rippling with fascination as the students began to grasp the concept. Over the past weeks, they had witnessed remarkable transformations. Species that once relied purely on logic now incorporated intuitive leaps into their problem-solving. Mathematical prodigies learned to appreciate the beauty of imperfection. Remarkable, the professor's translated voice carried a note of wonder. They're accessing cognitive pathways that have been dormant in their species for millennia. Sarah nodded, watching as a Timeweaver student successfully imagined a color that didn't exist in any timeline they could perceive. It's like they're remembering how to play. Every species must have had this ability once, before they became too focused on pure advancement. The professor's shelf shifted to display an intricate pattern, one they had discovered in the sealed records. Like this. They projected the image larger, revealing its similarity to both a child's drawing found in ancient Earth ruins and a mathematical sequence from a long-lost alien civilization. Exactly. Sarah stood, walking through the hologram. We're not teaching them anything new. We're helping them rediscover something their ancestors knew but forgot. She paused, considering. Just like humans forgot our own connection to the stars. A gentle chime indicated the arrival of archivist Minsora, their idea network expanding to share new information. We've completed the analysis of the star map you unlocked. The pattern doesn't just repeat across space, it repeats across time. The chamber's holographic displays shifted, showing the movement of stars across thousands of years. Sarah watched in awe as the pattern emerged, disappeared, and emerged again in different sectors of the galaxy, like a cosmic dance. It's beautiful, one of the crystal harmonic students chimed. Like a song written in starlight. Professor Zix 427's shell pulsed with sudden revelation. Not just a song. A message. Sarah, what if the Infinity Cascade riddle wasn't just a test? What if it was an invitation? The implication sent ripples of excitement through the assembled beings. Sarah felt her heart race as she considered the possibility. An invitation from our ancestors. To remember who we were, who we could be. More than that, Minsora's thought voice resonated with excitement. The pattern is approaching alignment again. In your stellar time measurement, it will complete its cycle in less than 1 Earth year. Professor Zix 427 moved to the center of the chamber, their shell radiating intense colors. The Council has approved our proposal. We're assembling a joint research expedition, the first of its kind. Humans working alongside the most advanced species in the galaxy, as equals. Sarah looked around at the chamber full of students who had learned to dream, at the professor who had learned to imagine, at the ancient patterns that had waited so long to be understood. Not just as equals, she said softly. As teachers and students both, we all have something to remember. The Academy's Grand Assembly Hall had never held such a diverse gathering. Representatives from every known spacefaring civilization filled the dimensional arrays, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. At the center of it all stood Sarah Chen, no longer the nervous exchange student but a bridge between worlds. The message hidden in the stars, she addressed the assembly, her voice carrying to all through their neural interfaces, wasn't meant for any single species. It was meant for all of us together. The holographic display above showed the completed star pattern, now understood not as a riddle but as a story written across time and space. Professor Zix 427 floated beside Sarah, their shell radiating a perfect balance of logical precision and artistic beauty. For too long, the professor's translated voice resonated through the hall. We'd measured advancement by our ability to move beyond our origins, to become purely logical, purely efficient, purely perfect. Their shell shifted to display a pattern that somehow combined mathematical precision with organic flow. We forgot that true advancement means embracing all that we are. The Time Weaver's representatives shimmered as they added their perspective. We see now that time is not just a sequence of events, but a canvas for possibility. Their form rippled through past and future states. Humans never forgot this. They kept it alive in their art, their stories, their dreams. Sarah gestured to the star map, where the ancient pattern was approaching its millennial alignment. Our ancestors, all of our ancestors, left us this message not as a test of logic, but as a reminder of balance. The pattern couldn't be solved by computation alone, or by intuition alone. It needed both. The assembly hall hummed with translated excitement as Sarah revealed the next phase. The joint expedition will launch as the pattern reaches alignment. Humans, working alongside the most advanced species in the galaxy, will follow this stellar path our ancestors left for us. A quantum collective representative shifted through probability states before settling into a unified form. The Academy's curriculum has been permanently altered. All species will now study what we once dismissed as primitive human characteristics: imagination, creativity, intuitive leaping. And humans, Professor Zix 427 added, their shell glowing with pride, will learn the advanced mathematics and sciences we once thought beyond them. Not as replacing their natural gifts, but as enhancing them. The Assembly's attention turned to the newest addition to the Academy's architecture. A massive crystalline spire rose from the center of the campus, its design an unprecedented collaboration between human artists and alien architects. Within its structure, the infinity cascade pattern flowed like living energy, each layer revealing new depths when viewed from different perspectives. "This is just the beginning," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of both history and future. "Each of us holds a piece of the greater pattern. The riddle wasn't meant to be solved. It was meant to be shared." Professor Zix 427's shell shifted to its most transparent state, revealing the pure energy within. Sarah Chen will lead the expedition as our first human advanced species joint research director. Her unique perspective, combined with our technological capabilities, may finally help us understand who we all once were and who we might become. The assembly hall erupted in a cascade of translated celebrations. Crystal harmonics chimed in perfect resonance with Earth classical music. Quantum collectives created probability art in midair. Time Weavers shared visions of possible futures that combined scientific precision with artistic beauty. Sarah looked out at the gathered species, then up through the transparent dome at the star-filled sky above. The pattern was there, written in light across the cosmos, waiting for them all to remember not just what they had been, but what they could be together. "Ready for the next adventure, Professor?" she asked. Professor Zix 427's shell sparkled with colors that somehow managed to express both logical certainty and boundless imagination. "My dear colleague," they replied, "I believe it's already begun."